Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of What the Forensics. My name is Rebecca, and I am joined here once again today by the lovely Journey and Nicole. Last week, we delved into the mind boggling case of Lori Vallow Daybell, and this week, to continue our two-part series of ongoing cases, Journey is going to tell you all about the case of American actor Jonathan Majors. Just before we get started, I would also like to note that we do have a listener's discretion advised, as there are discussions of domestic abuse and suicide. But with that being said, I would love to get into this episode. And Journey, would you care to tell us more about what's going on with Jonathan Majors?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to do a little bit about who he was and then the crimes that he's being charged with currently. So Jonathan Majors was born September 7th, 1989 in Santa Barbara County, California. He grew up on the Vandenberg military base with his mom, who is a pastor, his sister, and his brother, as well as his father, who was in the U.S. Air Force. And his parents separated when they moved to Texas a few years later. He describes his parents' separation as his father just vanishing, but he has now returned to Jonathan's life, and they have some form of a relationship. It was very confusing researching it because a lot of the articles just said that his dad just vanished, and I thought he legitimately vanished. I didn't realize that his parents had actually separated, and he was using that as kind of a explanation for that. And so his mom had actually remarried at some point during his childhood, and she did everything in her power to support her children. However, Jonathan still had a little bit of a rough childhood, and he was arrested for shoplifting. He was suspended from high school for fighting, and he ended up living in his car for 2 years after being kicked out of his house at around the age of 16. And then after watching Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, he kind of found a safe space in the world of theater. And he says that Heath Ledger's performance of the Joker resembled the moral dualities of good and evil that he kind of grew up around. And so that led him to becoming an actor. And he wanted to inspire other kids like how he was inspired by Ledger's Joker performance, which is pretty cool. And so to achieve this goal of becoming an actor, he went to the University of North Carolina School of Arts for his bachelor's degree. He then went to the Yale School of Drama, where he graduated with a Master of Fine Arts in 2016. And while he was still a student at Yale, he got his first on-screen role on the ABC miniseries When We Rise, where he portrayed Ken Jones, who is a real-life gay activist. And so it sounds like a really, really cool TV show, so I'm going to definitely check that out. And that same year, he was in the Western film Hostiles, which came out in September 2017. So it was filmed and everything in 2016 and then released 2017. And this was only the start of his success because he went on to star in 13 movies and 4 TV shows and is set to star in 2 more Avengers movies and Loki Season 2. And he is currently the star of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and Creed 3, which are in theaters at the time of recording, which is pretty cool. And so now that you know just a little bit about Majors and who he was, this is a very difficult topic because there's so much to it and so many complexities of it. But it's also important to note that Jonathan Majors is a Black man, for those of you who don't know who he is, and that plays a very influential role in this case. And so on March 25th, 2023, around 11 a.m., he was arrested for assault, strangulation, and harassment charges from his home in Manhattan. And so this stemmed from a domestic dispute with a 30-year-old woman who sustained injuries to her head and neck and was taken to the hospital in stable conditions that same day. And so the complaint against him doesn't name the woman who's charging him. However, we do know now that it was his girlfriend at the time, Grace Jabari, who was pressing these charges. And so in the complaint, it states that he, quote, struck her about the face with an open hand, causing substantial pain and a laceration behind her ear, end quote. And it also claims that he, quote, put his hand on her neck, causing bruising and substantial pain, end quote. And so this dispute allegedly occurred during a car ride back to his house the night before. And then he ended up being released from custody later in the day on March 25th, and his lawyers are very adamantly denying any wrongdoing on his part. And in a statement released by his attorney, she claimed that the woman was, quote, having an emotional crisis for which she was taken to the hospital, end quote, and that Majors, quote, did not assault her whatsoever, end quote. So again, very adamantly denying any wrongdoing on his part. And so his attorney also alleges that it was Majors who called 911 the morning of March 25th. And she says, quote, the police arrived with the paramedics as is standard procedure and arrested Mr. Majors due to an NYPD protocol requiring arrest in certain circumstances. His lawyer also added that, quote, the accuser also disavowed any allegations that he had done anything to her and confirmed that Mr. Majors called 911 because of her mental condition, end quote. And so I just want to address the fact that it seems a little odd that there's a protocol requiring that the police arrest someone in certain circumstances. And I would very much like to know, or like have those circumstances defined, because I don't understand. That's so very vague and scary.
Yeah, why one, not the other, that kind of thing.
Well, exactly, especially if you're arresting the person who called 911. Like, that doesn't feel...
yeah.
It feels a little like victim blaming if you're going to the scene of a crime and arresting the person who called them. But I mean, at least right now where we stand, we don't know the full story.
Yeah. And so her mental condition, according to one source, they had a fight in a taxi cab on the way home to his house in Chelsea before she went out to party for the rest of the night. And then upon returning home later that night, or very early the next morning, she had sent Majors a suicide note, had taken several sleeping pills, and then was found alone in a locked room in a closet by Majors with a cut behind her ear and a broken finger. And so I believe this is when he called 911. That's when I would call 911. So I'm assuming that that's when he called 911.
Yeah, I would call 911 then too.
So keep that in mind. And so the next day, on March 26th, so after he had been arrested and taken to the police station and then released from custody, Majors was arraigned on charges including assault, attempted assault, harassment, and aggravated harassment in connection to the arrest the previous day. And his attorney revealed that there were 2 written statements from the woman recanting the allegations against him in the form of text messages on March 30th. And so there's a lot of controversy, I guess, around these text messages because they can't fully prove that they're from her or something. I don't really know what the issue is with them, but I know that some people aren't happy with them. But in one text, supposedly Grace said, quote, please let me know you're okay when you get this. They assured me that you won't be charged. They said they had to arrest you as protocol when they saw the injuries on me and they knew we had a fight. I'm so angry that they did, and I'm sorry you're in this position. We'll make sure nothing happens about this. I told them it was my fault for trying to grab your phone. I only just got out of the hospital. Just call me when you're out. I love you. End quote. And so, if she had, I don't understand how charges could still be pressed if she had told the police officers, don't charge him.
Yeah. And if she's coming to be like, hey, this is what happened. Why did you charge him just for being there? Why is that still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So then in a different text message, she allegedly said, quote, they just called again to check on me, and I reiterated how this was not an attack, and they do not have my blessing on any charges being placed. I read the paper they gave me about strangulation, and I said point blank, this did not occur and should be removed immediately. The judge is definitely going to be told this. She ensured this to me. I know you have the best team, and there is nothing to worry about. I just want you to know that I'm doing all I can on my end. I also said to tell the judge to know that the origin of the call was to do with me collapsing and passing out and your worry as my partner due to our communication prior, out of care. She promised all will be relayed, end quote. So that statement helps me believe that she did send a suicide note and was his cause for concern was valid, I guess. And so now that there's just like a little bit of reasonable doubt of whether or not he did these things, let's explore some of the other evidence in this case.
I don't know if I missed this, but do we know the skin color of this female? Does that play a part in this?
So she's white.
Okay.
I don't know if she has if she's like a white passing ethnicity, but in the photos and stuff, she is white.
And he is a large black male?
Yeah.
Just
in the United States?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just going back a little bit when we were saying like if she rescinded her charges, I'm not positive how charges towards like assault kind of play out, I guess is the words I want. But I know that like in terms of like homicide or murder and stuff, like charges can be laid whether or not someone wants to press charges. But I know that's not the case for everything. Like if you didn't want to press, if you were personally assaulted and you chose not to press charges, if I understand the law correctly, police don't have the right to press charges because you as the person, like as the victim, chose not to. But
yeah,
I very well could be misremembering that simply because I know there are some that it's the government's basically responsibility to charge them, and some it's the victim's responsibility to seek charges.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just really strange if she did rescind them, why they would continue with it.
Yeah, because I feel like what you were saying of like in homicide cases, the state can still press charges because the victim isn't there to press the charges. And so then I think in this case, yeah, I don't know. It's just weird.
Yeah.
And so there's footage from the vehicle where this dispute took place, as well as testimonies from witnesses. There's footage from the street corner where the original fight happened, the nightclub, the penthouse elevator, as well as body camera footage from the police officers. So there is a lot of evidence in this case. And so the taxi cab driver saw and heard everything that happened and witnessed Jabari, quote, hitting, scratching, and attacking, end quote, Majors before he asked the driver to pull over just before 1 a.m. And he said that he did pull over at Major's request and then watched as she chased him after he ran out of the cab. And apparently this fight was started by her accusing Majors of cheating on her and that she was then attempting to like take his phone. And then there is footage of her at a nightclub later that same night, like after the taxi cab, where it shows her using both of her hands just fine and that she had no signs of a physical attack. And this is very important because she alleges that Jonathan grabbed her hand and broke her finger during their altercation in the cab. And there's also elevator footage from that same night after the taxi cab fight where she adjusts her hair with her right hand, which is supposed to be injured. So there's like quite a few videos where her hand is obviously not injured. And then this is annoying. But when the police arrived on scene and body camera footage shows the officers checking out the penthouse, commenting on how big it was, and then asking if Jonathan Majors was, like, if it was really his apartment. Because how could a black man in America own such a nice place?
Did they know who he was? Did they know that he was okay?
Yeah. But also, how can you ask that? Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Like, I can understand being like, wow, this is a nice place. But then to be like, how can you afford this? Like, well,
yeah,
this isn't yours. That's a little too far.
But if he was white, they wouldn't think twice about it.
They'd be like, oh, yeah, you're just a businessman. You make money. Sure.
Exactly. And so then apparently there's also footage of officers coaching Jabari on what to say to them about what Majors did to her. And supposedly an officer tells her 19 times to say that Mr. Majors grabbed her by the throat. And then she says that.
There's actual footage of police officers coaching her? Like body cam footage of...
Yeah. I didn't see that. Mm-hmm.
And they took her word for that.
I don't like.
Okay.
And I'm nervous that in the trial that this evidence is somehow going to get lost or be corrupted.
Yeah, they're going to spin it in a way that the jurors don't know that she was prompted 18, 19 times before she finally said yes.
Exactly.
Oh, for sure. Because, I mean, just think of, like, trials of people who are wrongfully convicted. I know we've spoken of them in the past of a case, and I'm sorry I can't remember the specific name at the time, but of people who were mentally ill or had lower IQ, not saying she did, that were completely coaxed by the police in the interrogation, but the only stuff they showed jurors were the actual confession.
Yeah.
But no, it's just like you said, Nicole, they are totally probably going to spin it like, oh, we didn't coax her, we didn't say anything, but it's so unimpartial. And I know that's not a word, and I apologize, but the jurors deserve to see the whole thing because it's innocent until proven guilty.
Exactly.
And if the police are aiding in the statements of the victims, then that's a big problem.
Yeah, exactly. And so I haven't seen this footage myself, so I can't verify whether or not this actually happened. Because a lot of the sources were like TMZ and Page 6. And so it was just kind of like, I tried my best to find reliable sources, but I don't know for sure if this is something that happened or not. And so this case is going to trial on August 3rd. So it hasn't even gone to trial yet. And so all of this evidence hasn't been brought to court or anyone has like testified or anything. So I kind of just want to like stay on top of it to see where it goes. But that being said, there was an updated incident report filed 2 months after Majors was arrested by Grace Jabari. And so in this report, she no longer accuses him of grabbing her neck and says that he did not push her into the vehicle, but that he did slap her. And she also changed her story of him grabbing her hand to him just grabbing her finger that ended up broken.
So there's a lot of back and forth. A lot of back and forth.
Yeah. And so his defense, sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to ask, has she what's the situation been between their communications before this trial? Because I know with Lori and Chad, they were not granted to talk to each other, leading up to the trial.
Yeah, I don't know. From the sounds of it, they haven't been talking. Okay. He now has a new girlfriend.
Oh, plot twist.
So the whole, possibly he's cheating on her makes sense. It still doesn't excuse the fact that she had these charges or whatever, but no, it does make sense a little bit. So yeah, Jonathan Majors' defense team maintains that Jabari confronted him, hitting and scratching him, and then went out clubbing and then passed out in a closet in his home, where she then woke up with injuries to her ear and finger. And as of the second last week of June, there was an I card issued for Grace Jabari, which is kind of like an arrest warrant, but it just isn't signed by a judge, and it stands for incident card. So it kind of just lets police officers know that she's a person of interest and should be arrested if they come across her. That was my understanding.
What would she be charged with, though? Is it more of a, hey, bring her in and we'll figure whatever out? Or is it more of a, we need her in here so she can't do anything else?
Yeah, so I think it was more of he's claiming that their relationship has been physically violent before, but no incident has been reported to the police. And it's also with the amount of this footage, she's obviously lying to the police. Or not obviously, but they think. That's my understanding. I didn't find a statement that said point blank what it was for, but she hasn't been arrested that I know of, so they're obviously don't really care about it.
I've never heard about iCards. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I know, me neither. So again, take it with a grain of salt. I did my best to get reliable information from tabloids, it felt like, so we'll see.
I completely believe the information you're giving me. I've just never heard of an iCard, and it just makes me want to do further research and wonder is that basically a card to detain them, not without evidence, because they clearly have evidence, but I've only ever heard of like a judge being able to provide the warrant to be able to actually take someone in. So that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, and I didn't think of like Googling what it actually is or anything. But I definitely was nervous about researching this because like some of the sources were so unreliable. And so I'm like, I'm really hoping that this is the most accurate information as possible. And so, in addition, there have been other women coming forward with claims of abuse from Majors, and one of the victims was even granted a temporary order of protection by a judge against him until his May 9th court date, which has come and gone. And there are also allegations like that go back for a decade, I guess. And so there's nothing really more known other than that other women have come forward. So I think they're saving most of that for the trial, which makes sense. And so the U.S. military has also pulled their advertisements that feature Jonathan Majors as they are, quote, deeply concerned about the allegations, end quote. They also stated, quote, while Mr. Majors is innocent until proven guilty, prudence dictates that we pull our ads until the investigation into these allegations is complete, end quote. So whatever that means. He was also dropped by his management company, Entertainment 360, and the public relations firm, The Ledge Company. And he was cut from an upcoming film, and his role is being recast. And the next Avengers movie is being postponed, as well as his invitation to the Met Gala was rescinded. And so there's like, according to Reddit, the next Avengers movie being postponed is really convenient with the writers going on strike. So they're just kind of like saying that it's being postponed for this when it actually might be the writers' strike, just to kind of like not take a side.
Just add fuel to the fire, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because everyone's mad at Disney for not like immediately removing him. But I have some issues with this case, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. And so it's a black man against a white woman in American courts, and so he is just almost doomed. Like his career is more or less over unless they can like definitively prove and have her say, I lied, like on the stand. And then they still have to deal with the other women coming forward. And so I was recommended this case from one of my friend's new boyfriend, who is a black man as well. And he's very passionate about this case because it's something that could very easily happen to him. Where when he started dating my friend, he was very nervous because she has so much power over like if something was to happen, no matter what, or if she just got the urge to call 911 and say that something happened, he would almost immediately be arrested just because of his skin color. And so he's just like, it was very interesting to have that pointed out because that's not something I ever would have thought. But he's like, I have to place so much trust in you that you're not going to do that to me. And then, yeah, it was just very interesting. And then, because we as white women never think about that.
I was just going to say, like, we as white women, like you just said, like, definitely take that for granted or don't put as much thought into it. I would say the majority don't put or think about that in a way that should be addressed and should be thought about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just, enlightening. And so there's also footage of her without the injuries that she claims came from him. And so I would just like to know where her injuries actually came from, or if they were like somehow self-inflicted, or if they like, I don't understand, or if there's something more going on that we don't know about. And it's very similar to the whole like Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, where yes, there is like, I don't know where I want to go with this. It's such a tough topic.
Yeah. Because you can't diminish the voices on each side, but then that line is blurred to, well, who do we trust and why are we believing those individuals?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's unfair to like punish him just because he's black and a man in this situation. But it's also unfair that like if this actually was how that happened, then to just completely ignore her story too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a weird line that
I think it's especially tough in excuse me, circumstances, especially revolving around like either domestic abuse or abuse of some sort, because it comes back to this whole concept and like this notion that like women often aren't believed. Like if you come forth, you're either told it didn't happen or you're not believed or you're making it up. But then when you add, in this case, a black male into the mix, then you have the whole side of, well, now there's this whole racial discrimination happening. Like, you have we're not going to believe the female because whatever, but then the male because he's a black male. And it's just this whole can of worms that it's a lot.
Yeah, it's like choosing the lesser evil, right? Of like, you can believe every woman that comes forward, but then you are condemning some innocent men.
Yeah.
But then if you believe every man, then you're like ignoring a lot of affected women. Like, it's just, it's such a catch-22.
It really, sorry, Nicole.
Nope, go ahead.
I was going to say I agree. It's very difficult because we don't want to victim blame, because generally, if we want like the court systems and the justice system to take victims seriously, we can't underestimate or basically undermine like what victims are saying. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the people being accused have the right to be considered innocent until proven guilty. And I don't think that's not an instance of victim blaming. It's simply following the system. And until we actually determine what happened, which could be very difficult in a case like this, especially with how much media is surrounding it. So it's obviously very hard to research, very hard to find the true facts. Mm-hmm. It's like, it really, I don't want to say unfortunately, it's up to the courts to decide, but like depending on the jury you get, depending on the price that they paid for the lawyers and all of this stuff, like this trial could honestly have multiple outcomes that might or might not benefit either of them.
Exactly. And like another thing is, he's such a big star right now. And so a lot of fans of stars kind of like lose their mind a little bit. So the women coming forward, whether or not they were actually victimized by him, like fans have done crazy things. So it's like,
that 15
not to say that their
fame.
Stories aren't true. I don't know, but there is, you do have to ask that question of, are they doing this for their 15 minutes of fame?
Yeah. And I think that's like the difficult thing too, because, and it's this, and this concept is involved or like comes up with a lot of different topics too, but like, is it that more people are coming forward because there's more discussion and openness about it? Or are more people coming forward to help and like not prove a point, but to like get their word out? Like, you have to take a look at the timing of it all, and it comes down to like, why now?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think we'll ever know that. And that's the tricky part, because that's what so much of this relies on too, is like the word from so many other victims and those who may be victims in this circumstance. Yeah.
And like, another thing is that he did have such like a rough childhood and like early adulthood that it's like, how many people from then would classify how he acted towards them as abusive behavior? Not to like excuse any of it, but it is, I don't know, another thought. Like, it's just such a convoluted case that you can't ever like fully understand without someone's feelings getting hurt, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's basically all I have on it. That's all that we really know. So I'm going to try and do like a little page on our website or something, just kind of updating it after the case goes to trial in August, because I think that would be kind of interesting just to see what happens, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think it'll be like as highly televised as like the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case, but it does kind of give me similar vibes.
Yeah, and it's like, it's honestly sad that it's not going to be that publicized, but I get that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard are higher celebrity status, but then like but he's also a movie star. He's also a prominent figure. Why is he not getting the same media time?
Yeah.
And why? Right?
Yeah.
I was also thinking about, like, just throughout you telling us this case study, like, just the amount of similarities between the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case. There is also a lot of differences because I understand that the woman in this case did kind of rescind her statements and stuff like that, and Amber Heard didn't. But still, it's just it's very similar in the sense of, unfortunately, as it is with a lot of domestic violence cases, because unless you're consciously, taking videos or audio or pictures or whatever, like it's going to be a lot of hearsay evidence. And that's so unfortunate to say, because there are countless victims that genuinely do have a good case, but because it's hearsay, it's hard to prosecute. But I just hope that the actual truth comes out in this case, and that it's not faked for the publicity, or it's not unjustly convicted because of Rachel. I don't know exactly how to end that sentence, but
no, we get what you're saying.
No, it's so tricky, but I just wanted to, like, I don't know, bring everyone's attention to it and just have a little bit of a discussion, because it is a very important discussion to have. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for what I have for Jonathan Majors and what's going on in his life right now.
Well, Journey, I very much appreciate you telling us about it. Like, I definitely have heard his name in the media simply because of being, like, a famous movie star. He's in Ant-Man and the Wasp, which are great movies. But just to kind of hear what he's going through and hearing, like, both sides of it, like, it very much is one of those cases that's it sounds like there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff kind of going on that the public isn't really aware of, and that maybe there's some injustices happening. I appreciate you kind of bringing us onto, like, the whole scope of the investigation and going through all of the details with us and kind of the chronological order of everything going down. So I really hope this was informative to all of our listeners, because it definitely was to me. And I really look forward to kind of hearing the updates on this case. And we will be keeping our website kind of updated on, like, the trials of both him as well as the case that Nicole had spoken about. But with all of that being said, I do believe that this is the end of our current ongoing cases. If you guys have enjoyed hearing about ongoing cases, I know that we would really enjoy to speak about them further. So if you've enjoyed, please let us know, and we'll kind of seek out more cases that are ongoing, either whether they're really popular or maybe they're just really not known and you just want to bring more attention to them. We would love to talk about them. So just send us some suggestions, and that would be really awesome. But with that being said, the next topic we'll be speaking about will be the person named Yang Jinghai, and we'll be talking about the science of forensic traumatology, and that will be in just a couple weeks' time. And before we get into kind of where people can find us with our social media, I would kind of like to share an interesting article that I found for you guys that I was kind of going back and forth on what to share, but I thought you guys would think this was really interesting.
I'm very excited to hear about this.
Oh, good. I'm also excited to share it. Okay. So I found an article. It was on CNN. I actually found it on, like, Bing's homepage, like MSN.
Nice.
But it is a CNN article, and the title, which pretty much gives it all away, but I thought I would obviously share it with you, is "Ancient pendants made from giant sloth bones suggest humans were in Americas earlier than thought."
What? Are these like the giant sloths that used to roam?
Yes. And
No way.
And I am going to share, like, in a minute, like, just how big this species was in terms of, like, size. I just thought it was so cool. Sloths are so cool. But
I had no idea there were giant sloths.
Wait, you didn't know this?
No, I didn't.
Oh my gosh, Journey. You need to look up the skeleton of a giant sloth in comparison to a human. They're like elephant size.
Oh, it's incredible.
Okay, I'll do that when we're done recording.
Beautiful. So, in Brazil, archaeologists who were working in Santa Helena Rock Shelter, which is in central Brazil, have just found 3 giant sloth bones, which are believed to have actually been perforated. So they drilled a hole through them with whatever ancient technology we had, and also polished by humans to be pendants worn on as jewelry. So these pendants are very significant, as they're believed to be between 25,000 and 27,000 years old, and are currently the oldest known ornaments that have ever been uncovered in the Americas, as well as the only ones ever found to have been made by the bones of giant sloths. And I will get into the significance of the age in just a couple of minutes. I just want to talk about more of the research because it's super cool. So currently, there's research being conducted in the Santa Helena Rock Shelter. And in recent years, in this cave, scientists have uncovered many rock paintings, which are believed to have been created by indigenous populations who inhabited the area thousands of years ago. These paintings include depictions of other humans as well as animals, and scientists believe that this kind of shows us just like a little bit of a look into the culture that ancient Brazilians had. So ever since their discovery, scientists have been studying this rock shelter to gain a better understanding of Brazil's prehistoric cultures because of all the paintings found. And with this, they also found that it was used as a shelter by the now extinct species of giant sloths called Glossitherium phonesis. And I really apologize if I mispronounced that. Glossitherium phonesis. Just for a little bit of scope, and Journey, I know you said you hadn't even heard of giant sloth species. This, even though they were on the smaller scale of giant sloths, on average weighed about 600 kilograms or 1,323 pounds. So they were like, I believe the article said, on average, they were larger and heavier than the modern day brown bear.
Wow, that's insane. I cannot believe that there were sloths as big as brown bears and they just like eat leaves and shit. Like, that's crazy.
Right?
I know. There's no way there were like herbivores, just little giant sloths just roaming around. And I didn't have this kind of in my blurb about the article, but now that we're talking about giant sloths, I am just so excited to say that these researchers also believe, like, it's not confirmed because it's very hard to confirm this kind of stuff, but they believe that these sloths and the humans actually like lived, I can't remember the word, cohabitated these caves, because some caves in Brazil are actually so large that they've discovered that these giant caverns and like cave systems were actually the burrows of giant sloths that are so large that they are like humans can just roam around them freely.
Stop. No way.
I know. So they believe they co-inhabited because sloths are, even today, a very non-threatening species. Mm-hmm. And even back then, they were herbivores. So humans likely wouldn't feel threatened because they were only eating leaves. But just to get back on track to the pendants they found and back onto the kind of new research, they found that these pendants are made out of sloth osteoderms, which I have since learned from reading this are they're bony plates that are embedded in the sloth skin, which is really similar to like an armadillo scale. So it's like kind of just like a bony plate of armor that this animal has.
It's hardcore.
So I know. I wish I had that, honestly. So this team of researchers, which was led by paleontologist Ty Pensani, they did an analysis on 3 osteoderms, which were found in this cave. It didn't specify the amount, but a couple of them, like 1 or 2 of them, were modified. So what they suspect to be like human pendants. And then 1 or 2 of them, again, were just unmodified sloth scales that they just found in the cave that weren't used. They found that on the modified osteoderms, or the pendants, there appeared to be microscopic marks that indicated that they were polished by human hands prior to being fossilized. And because of how extremely rare these pendants are, like these are the first of its kind they've been found, the researchers didn't conduct age dating. I suspect it was carbon dating. It didn't specify in the article, but by the sounds of it, it was carbon dating. They didn't do that on the pendants themselves because it was much too damaging. So they didn't want to like damage these very rare artifacts. But they did date other materials that they found at the same location, at the same layer of sediment or layer of dirt. So like they analyzed unmodified giant sloth bones on the same layer, as well as charcoal and other sediment. And they discovered through these analyses that they're between 25,000 and 27,000 years old.
Holy cow.
I know. And this is super cool. Like, I'm trying to contain my excitement because this whole article, I was like, what? This is crazy. This is a really big discovery because the South and North Americas, geologists and archaeologists pretty much mutually agree were like the last continents settled by humans. And because of this, the exact time period of when humans first made contact is very heavily debated because of the lack of basically evidence we have for it. So prior to these discoveries of the pendants, other research suggested 16,000 years ago, but really recent research suggests that there were human footprints fossilized in New Mexico that were the age of between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago. But even with that being said, with the oldest possible fossils being that long ago, the artifacts that the researchers just found in Brazil predate the footprints found in New Mexico by at least 3,000 years. So this suggests that humans were in the Americas at least 3,000 years before we initially believed. And they are still doing studies on these pendants made out of sloth bones, and it's still ongoing. And I will update you guys as I find them, because I will probably be keeping up with this research because that is so cool.
So I have heard the reason why that they were so large, I don't know if this is true or not, but like, is because of the oxygen levels. There was so much more oxygen that promoted cell growth and like size growth. So a lot of animals and creatures way back were on such a larger scale. So that could explain why they were that large.
I didn't personally read anything about like why they were so big.
Mm-hmm. No, that's just a fun little fact that I don't know if it's true or not. I just remember hearing it at some point. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it sounds like it would be accurate.
Right.
The air was a lot healthier thousands of years ago than it is now.
23,000 years ago does not seem long enough ago for them to have been this big and then like evolved down to the size that sloths are now. Like that's in recent history. That's crazy.
See, that's what I wonder as well, especially given like this article I read, like they did say that this species of giant sloth, which again was just over on average 1,600 pounds larger than a brown bear, were on the smaller side of the giant sloth species.
Yeah, that's
so
crazy.
To see like how they got so small in terms of the entire age of the universe got so small is so fascinating. And yeah, I am personally very excited to keep up with this research, because I know they did say that they're looking into doing further research on, there's like and I didn't look into this a lot, so I apologize, but there's new research, I believe, coming out of Russia. It's a new, much more non-intrusive way of doing DNA testing that they apparently, take this with a grain of salt, is so precise they can even detect whether or not a human wore it as like jewelry at some point in history.
Oh.
How are they able to prove that it was worn?
That's what I'm also wondering. I'm not positive. They said something about taking a core sample of deer teeth, because I think that was the only current research they have on this new technology, which is why I'm saying take it with a grain of salt. But apparently they were able to detect human DNA on like this, like the outermost surface of this deer teeth, which is what they kind of extrapolated to be as like someone must have worn it for a long enough period of time that they shed their skin cells and it fossilized. But yeah,
Cool.
this article on these sloth pendants being possibly the oldest human record so far of humans in the Americas, like the North and South Americas,
So cool.
is so crazy. And like I was saying before, I had another article to show you guys, and then yesterday I was just scrolling on my computer, and then this came up, and I was like, that's way cooler.
Gotta talk about the sloths.
Yeah, that is much, much cooler. And I didn't even know it was a thing.
Well, thank you for sharing. That was really neat. I kind of want a sloth pendant now. How big were they again? Sorry? Because when I think of like a sloth scale, like an armadillo sloth scale, I think like the size of your palm or your hand.
Yeah, so apologies for my couple mouse clicks right now. I'm just sharing the link with them, but these pictures will also be on our website because they're too cool not to share. If you guys go to this link, it shows you pictures of the sloth scales they found. It doesn't really give a good scale size. Oh, there is actually a scale size reference. I'm completely lying. They're pretty small, but you can see, if I remember correctly, the one on the very left side is unmodified. This is just a sloth scale. Compared to the other two, with the one on the furthest right being about a centimeter wide, very polished, and has a perfect hole in it. It's very clear why they believed, plus with microscopic samples, why humans perforated and polished these bones.
And the one that's unmodified looks like it has 2 holes in it naturally already, which is kind of crazy. It's also super weird to me that they have both an exoskeleton and like an internal skeleton, because I don't picture sloths with like,
I know,
like an armadillo scales, right? Like that's so weird.
Like, I understand that armadillos have an exoskeleton, same with like pangolins from today, like they have one. But just to see how much like species have evolved to change, like the fact that sloths had an exoskeleton and were 1,600 pounds, and now they're like the size of a cat and they're just fluffy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Evolution and discovering like the timeline of humans across the world is probably one of the most fascinating topics to me. It is just incredible to learn about our very, very prehistoric ancestry. So, with all of that fun and interesting information about giant sloths, Journey, would you care to tell us where all of our wonderful listeners can find us on social media?
Of course. So people can find us on our Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at What the Forensics. Our Twitter is WT Forensics PC. Our website is whattheforensics.ca, your one-stop shop for everything forensics. And our email is whattheforensics@gmail.com for any questions, comments, or concerns.
Thank you so much. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. I know we definitely did. We will definitely keep you guys updated on these 2 ongoing cases as they're very much in the forefront of our minds. And with that being said, this has been another episode of What the Forensics. We really hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Just a reminder to everyone that we are not professionals in the forensic science field. We are just interested in forensics and want to share what we are learning with our listeners. We're trying to give you the most accurate information, but we are human and can make mistakes. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you next week.